Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 77th level of the RPG Cave, aka the first episode of 2023, and also a palindrome episode. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 elf medic, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Monday? We're back! We're back in the cave after the holidays for another fantastic year of RPGs, but how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. It's just pretty chill. End of the holidays, I have to get mentally prepped for work again. So It's going to be interesting new year. But yeah, how's it palindrome, by the way? What's the
because
thing?
It's 77, so it's the same frontwards and backwards.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, episode 77. Nice. Nice.
Yeah,
It is palindrome.
exactly.
Cool.
I mean, we only get to do those so often, Garret, and the more of these episodes that we do, the more we climb the levels, of course, of the dungeon, the less and less we get to do palindromes. So we got to celebrate it while we had, of course. But
Of course.
But you're off during the holidays, right? You had a good holiday?
Yeah, I worked in between Christmas and New Year's, but I had some days off, and we actually hang out downtown a little bit. We went to see the fireworks in San Francisco off the Bay Bridge. It was super cool to see, and then trying to walk back home was interesting. A lot of people out there celebrating and stuff. So yeah, no, it was super fun. Holidays. What about you?
Nice. Yeah. As for me, I worked pretty much the entire time. I had 2 days off in the last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
so I've been working nonstop.
Oh man.
I mean, with multiple, 10-hour days and stuff like that. But, it's one of those things
Goodness.
where I actually don't mind working during the holidays, especially since we do usually work from home during that time. So I still got to spend time with my family. Like I went home to visit, my mom and my brother and a lot of other, family
That's
members
nice.
on Christmas. And then I spent New Year's with my girlfriend. So it was a lot of fun. I actually had like a pretty good holidays, I think, all in all, surprisingly. Rather than, me, spending just the whole time working, I guess. So all in all, was good. But more importantly,
Nice.
before we jump into the show proper as well, Garret, did you play any games over the holiday? Like any RPGs?
Any RPGs? I've been playing Tiny Tina on my Steam Deck. I think I'm almost done with one playthrough. And we'll see if I go to a second playthrough. But I have been playing Ghost of Tsushima as well on PS5, just chugging along with that. Other than that, I've been binge watching Game of Thrones, so not as much game time, more binge watching than anything.
Nice.
So, anyways, yeah.
That's cool. As for me, I haven't had a ton of time to play games, as you can imagine, with all the travel. Like I've only really been home maybe 4 days since the last time you and I talked.
Oh dang, yeah.
Yeah. So I had my Switch with me, so I played a lot of Switch
That's
stuff.
good.
I'm on my second playthrough of River City Girls 2 because of course I am. But it's it's a beat 'em up RPG, so it's relevant to this show. Also, I've been playing. I'm still playing a lot of World of Warcraft with my girlfriend. Her and I are just leveling up characters together, and we're having just a fun time doing that. And then a lot of binge watching shows too. We watched Rings of Power, which I actually kind of liked.
Oh, Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah,
Nice.
that was pretty cool. And of course, saw the biggest movie in the world, Garret, Avatar 2, everyone's favorite movie.
Oh, I did see that yesterday as well.
I saw you
Yeah.
saw that as well. So yeah,
Yeah. It was interesting. It was like a video game, but it's not. Like
pretty much.
just back and
It was it
it was
reminded me so much of like old James Cameron like action films, like
Yeah.
True Lies or Terminator 2 or something like that. Like it was so different in tone from the first one, so I actually really enjoyed Avatar 2.
yeah,
But,
it was a good movie
yeah.
for sure.
But enough about all that, Garret. This is the RPG Cave where we talk about RPGs all the time and not Avatar. Until maybe we'll talk about Avatar when that Avatar game comes out, because maybe it's an RPG. Who
Oh
knows?
yeah,
But-
that'll come out.
Yeah. So let's clear the dungeon of these pesky mobs. So folks, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, if you're watching the live stream right now, over at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, or if you're watching the video on demand later, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already, and then ding, 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 ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we go live with new videos. Just like we did over the holidays, of course, in case y'all missed it, we actually did a collaboration with all the hosts over at Carpool Gaming. We did like a big Game of the Year episode, which of course was on the RPG Cave podcast feed, but was also on YouTube as well. So if you missed out on the video was actually something really special as well. So definitely make sure you can go to the YouTube and check that out as well. I mean, if nothing else, you'll miss the gag of Matt holding up his sign that just says anyways the entire time. Anytime I say the word anyways, he holds up the sign, which is great. Also, if you're listening on audio feeds, don't forget to subscribe to us there and rate us if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, if you want to throw a little tip in the little tip jar, head on over to patreon.com/carpoolgaming to get some exclusive content as well as some cool stuff we have coming up. Maybe a cool special Yumi Capri podcast, or I know Sean actually put out a new episode of the Pants Patreon podcast for Patrons podcast, so go check that out. And then last but not least, if you want an RPG Cave t-shirt or any other Carpool Gaming merch, don't forget to head on over to our merch store, bit.ly/CPG merch. Well, with all that out of the way, Garrett, let's read from the sacred texts, because we got a fun topic to start off the year. Of course, we did this last year. It is our annual predictions episode this week. Now, last year, we combined our RPG preview for the year and our predictions into one episode. But this year, I thought it would be best. We're actually going to do the RPG preview next week, because there's so many RPGs coming out this year, Garrett, that we need a whole episode just to talk about them.
For sure.
So today we're going to just focus on our yearly predictions. And since, this is an annual thing now, Garrett, that means we actually have prediction data from last year that I thought it'd be fun to go through our predictions last year and see really cool. how correct we could guess the RPG landscape. And I actually don't think we did too terribly. Yes, the scores are not super high for us, folks, but at the same time, I feel like we did pretty well, since I think RPGs are a little bit harder to predict for than some other stuff. But anyways.
We were pretty detailed on these predictions too.
We were.
Yeah. So of course,
Garrett,
get some partial points there.
I'm going to start with you. We're going to read off some of your predictions. First off, Garrett predicted that Capcom will announce Dragon's Dogma 2 during a Sony State of Play, because the game was going to be a PS5 and Epic timed exclusive. But you did preface that, when you were talking about the announcement, that, that's not a major point or anything like that. So I actually decided to give you the full point for this one. I could have gave you a 0.75 or a 0.5 for getting, half of it right. But, it sounds like the exclusivity wasn't, the main hindering factor. And you just wanted to mention that that's how you thought they were going to swing Dragon's Dogma 2. But Dragon's Dogma 2 did get announced. It's coming at some point in the future. So who knows?
This was an interesting one, because I remember this slow announcement of Dragon's Dogma. It was a mixture of other things going around. I think there was a Monster Hunter and Resident Evil thing going on too.
Yeah.
And they kept mentioning Dragon's Dogma. Then they had a Dragon's Dogma celebration, a 10-year, I think, celebration going on.
10-year celebration.
It lasted for 10-year celebration. And they just talked about the game, and I'm like, okay, they're spending way too much time on this. What are they going to do with this? And of course, at the end, they're like, yeah, we're doing the sequel, Dragon's Dogma 2. We don't have a release date. We have the same director for it. So, I'm very excited for this one. I did enjoy what I've played for the first one. I think I need to replay it just to refresh my mind. It's been a while. But yeah, keep an eye out for this one. It's not going to be this year. Definitely not. But maybe more next year.
I mean, I would be surprised even if it comes out before 2025 at this point. But we'll see with Dragon's Dogma 2. But I know so many people were happy with that announcement. So I think that was a really big announcement from last year. And even I was skeptical. Because I listened back to the episode today, Garrett, to get all this data. And you could definitely hear the skepticism in my voice after hearing you mention the announcement. Although we did know that it was from the NVIDIA leak, but some of those things, it might take till 2026 to have some of those announced. You nailed the timing of it for sure. But next up, you said Avowed gets an in-depth gameplay trailer at E3, and it gets dated for spring 2023. That did not happen, so you got 0 points for that one.
Did not happen.
Next up, you said that a new Fire Emblem Echoes will be announced and will be released sometime in 2022. You had mentioned that it was either going to be like a Radiant Dawn or a Path of Radiance Fire Emblem Echoes game, because those are climbing in price, and they're like the price of Path of Radiance is ridiculous at this point. It's such an expensive game at this point, but I feel like Nintendo's just given up on that as well. Next up, Starfield gets an open critic score of 90 or higher. And you mentioned it on the episode that, Garrett, the reason why you brought this prediction in was because we had just done our fantasy draft, and I think it was just on the top of your mind, like Starfield getting a good.
Yes,
like,
it was on top of my mind, and man, oh man, I just, it got delayed and my heart sunk. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait more. But we'll get to that.
Yeah,
it'll be the year of 2023.
Also, sure. We did get the announcement today via the Xbox support page for Starfield that it is reconfirmed for early or first half of this year. So it's
first half.
So it's still supposed to be coming this year. And then your last prediction, Garrett. This was literally 4 predictions rolled into one, but I let you roll with it anyways. So Persona Q and Q2 come to Switch and PC. Persona 3 Portable with FES. So not just portable, but you said it was going to be like an amalgamation of the 2 games coming to PS4, PC, and Switch. Persona 4 Golden coming to Switch and PS4. And then Persona Dancing Endless Night Collection coming to Switch and PC. Only 2 of the 4 of those things happened. So I gave you 0.5 points for that one.
Yeah. And then the Persona 3 Portable is the portable version.
Right.
Not the...
Not what you had said, but I still decided to give it. Was close enough. It was close enough to give you the half of the 0.25.
Honestly, I can't believe it. They still did Persona 3 and Persona 4 kind of HD ports coming out in January. It's coming up really this month in like a few weeks. So that's awesome. The biggest
surprise as well, listening back to that episode, was how skeptical both you and I were on about them bringing these games to Xbox, because neither of us thought they were going to bring them to Xbox. And then they announced them for Xbox and Game Pass, of all things, which is just funny. And we didn't even talk about Persona 5 either, because you didn't even mention Persona 5 in your prediction, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah. So those were Garrett's predictions. 1.5 points for Garrett Bland. But how...
A very generous 1.5 points.
Yes, exactly. But how did Ryan Turford stack with the announcements here? First up for Ryan Turford, Persona 6 is announced, PS4 and PS5 exclusive in 2023, and the game's main color will be green. Obviously, did not happen. I was so sure, Garrett. I was so sure the final announcement of like the Persona announcement thing was gonna be Persona 6, and it did not happen. I was so sure of it. I can't believe that it didn't actually happen. But next up,
this was a toss up for sure, because I remember like they have those major announcements at the end with that concert, but the major announcement was the Persona 3, Persona 4, and Persona 5 stuff. So at least it did come out with a bang. We'll see if Persona 6 maybe this year.
Maybe,
I don't know.
Maybe
we'll see.
It's got to get announced at some point, Garrett, because I imagine it's coming this console generation, like at some point. But next up, Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters come to consoles in Q2 of 2022, and I said on the episode I thought they were coming out in May or June specifically. That obviously did not happen, and we just got the announcements, of course, that they're coming to consoles in spring of this year. So it is coming, but not on time. Next up, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is officially announced and released in 2022. Slam dunk.
You got this.
1 point.
Slam dunk.
Yeah.
I don't know if we were we skeptical of this coming out?
Well, we just didn't have any information of it. There weren't rumors or anything like that about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 at the time. It's just that I talked about it on the episode. I was like, it seemed like it was time for them to announce it. So yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. There you go. Next up, Final Fantasy Remake 2 is officially announced in 2022, dated for April 2023, PS5 exclusive. So the way I awarded this one, because I mentioned, the date in there, so I deducted half a point for that. But I mean, the fact that we also were very skeptical at the time that Final Fantasy Remake 2 would even be announced or talked about at all last year, especially with them talking about Final Fantasy 16, because you even mentioned it on the episode, Garrett. You're like, how could they possibly announce remake 2 while
Yeah.
also hyping up 16? And the answer is apparently they can, because they totally did. So I gave myself half a point for that one. But and then
Sounds good.
and then last one, a full remake of Final Fantasy Tactics is announced for 2023. That obviously did not happen, so 0 points, which means, Garrett, we tied 1.5 points each. And it doesn't matter, we both are winners. A winner is us.
We're
as
both
one might
winners.
say.
Yes. The winners are in our hearts the whole time. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, on most prediction shows, Garrett, I'm just so used to getting, 0 points. Especially like when Sean and I do like Xbox predictions, I'm always terrible at that. So it's just one of those things where any predictions episode where I end up with points, I feel like a winner when that happens.
Yeah.
But now,
I mean, you got Xenoblade Chronicles 3. That was I mean, I got to give it to you. That was that's a good slam dunk.
I actually think it
year,
was bolder for you though to predict Dragon's Dogma 2 and actually get that correct though.
Really?
I'm not gonna lie.
I think the Nvidia leak had that, but yeah, you're right. It was kind of weird to see them roll out like that too.
Yeah.
It was just so obscure, but they did announce it, so.
Well, I mean, we've gotten enough proof from that the Nvidia, all the Nvidia leaked games are real and that they will come out at some point. But some of those projects, again,
could be canceled.
Like 2026, 2027 announcements at this point. Like, there was like Final Fantasy 9 remake was on there, and I don't know when they announced that game. That might be literally 2026 that they announced that game. But we'll see, because we have predictions to talk about. Maybe in our predictions we'll talk about Final Fantasy 9, but we'll know.
Maybe.
So we're going to get into our predictions here. We also got some of the predictions from you, the RPG Cave community as well, that we'll actually go through as well. And actually, I forgot to write this down. I think the community was 4 for 5 for predictions from their community predictions on the last episode, because a lot of them were actually correct, believe it or not, including one that I actually chuckled at and called a dream prediction, which was from Delroy, where he correctly predicted Suikoden 1 and 2 are getting remasters coming out this year. And I'm just like, there's no way. Konami only cares about NFTs. They don't want to actually remake any of those games. And of course, Konami went all out last year and did the Cowabunga collection and announced a bunch of Silent Hill stuff. And then, the Suikoden stuff. So I've learned not to count out, Konami at this point. So yeah. We'll see what nuggets the community has for us tonight. But Garrett, would you like to go first or second? We came with 5 predictions each, just like last year. And of course, I've got some honorable mentions we'll go to at the end, and or just in case we double up on some. But
sure, I'll go first.
Sure,
I'll go for it. I don't know if you've been looking into the news, but there's many rumors going around that Atlas, of course, has many other projects going on this year. So I want to predict one. I'm not going to go grape shot everywhere and be crazy about it. I think they are realizing that they can go back to their older games. They can port it relatively lower effort and get a lot of, kind of revenue versus cost ratio. They can make it pretty high and make some extra cash. So I think this one is a pretty, I would believe this one, but I'll make it a little bit more specific. Shin Megami Tensei 4. I think they're going to grab that from the 3DS corpse now that it is, the corpse library over there.
Yeah.
They're going to make a complete edition. So that'll be 4 and Apocalypse. Those are 2 separate games. They're going to put them together. They're going to announce it for Switch and PC out in June this year.
Dang, that's a good prediction.
I think that's what's going to happen. So,
yeah. That and I mean, like, that makes sense with the timeline that we had for, 3 Nocturne to come out. So, I mean, there's a lot of sound reasoning you got there, Garrett. So good on you with that one. The only thing I question is whether or not they would bring in a lot of, like, how they would handle some of the touch stuff from 4 and Apocalypse. I'm sure it's probably mostly menu based, but I haven't played it. So you would know better than I would as far as how that would work. But otherwise, that would be an awesome package that I would totally be down for playing.
If you play Shin Megami Tensei 4, you would know this can be played on one screen.
Okay.
Literally, the bottom screen is a map inventory.
Okay.
There's really not much touch screen compatibility going on. But yeah, 4, and they need 4 in Apocalypse together. Like if they just do 4 and that's it, that would be kind of a, I don't know. That would be weird to do. They need to have, that's a complete story. Like they would leave out like literally half the story of 4 if they just have one version of it. So
Yeah.
that's why I think they're gonna do 2 games together, $60. I think it'll be a full price game for Switch and PC.
Yeah.
I think that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So
I
there you
also
go.
I also think if they do that though, it'll probably come to PS4 as well. I'm just gonna slide that in there as well. But
Yeah. The only kind of holdback with that is Shin Megami Tensei 5 was not on PlayStation
that's true.
either, and they haven't. Well, they
Well, they
did
put
have
Nocturne on
3.
there. Yeah.
They put Nocturne on there, so yeah, it's a 50-50 for PlayStation for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
But yeah, I hope it comes out this year.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Oh man. Now the real question is, Garrett, how awesome would it be if those were on Game Pass and on Xbox? Because I think that'd be pretty cool too.
That would be great. And now that I see Persona games on there's no limit
Yeah.
to the Game Pass reach. They want to search for more niche Japanese related stuff, and they are really buddy buddy with Sega and now with Atlas as well. And so I think it will be more reactionary. We'll see how the Persona games go, and if they go pretty well with Xbox and Atlas, I'm sure they'll continue a little bit more partnership together. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I still got in my back pocket. I didn't bring this as a prediction tonight. I still got in my back pocket that Sega and Atlas are gonna bring over like some of the Vanillaware games to Xbox, like Dragon's
be
Crown
great.
Pro or 13 Sentinels, or even something like Catherine Full Body. Like I think there's a lot of stuff from Atlas that they have in their catalog that they might bring to Xbox at some point, but we'll see. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
talk about that
that would
later.
be great.
'Cause that's not on my prediction sheet, but I shouldn't speak for you. But anyways, moving on, because of course that's my catchphrase.
Moving on.
Garrett, I told you before the show started, my predictions are kind of wild and crazy this year. I think I've got one like really sound prediction, but what's interesting about this year and what was interesting about putting predictions in for 2023 is I feel like as far as RPGs are concerned, because of how many RPGs we know about this year, I feel like we're not going to get a ton of RPG surprises, like get a ton of big RPGs that we don't know about. But I could be surprised. It could be, surprised because of how like crazy Square Enix went last year. So you never know. We could be really surprised by stuff. So that's part of the reason why my predictions are kind of out there. But I feel like I've got some good footing on this one. So I'm going to start with this first one, which is actually, believe it or not, one of my honorable mention predictions from last year that didn't actually come true, but I actually think is more likely this year than maybe last year. Looking back on things.
Okay.
And that is Sega announces that a new Sakura Wars game is in development and will release sometime in 2023. For folks that don't know, Sakura Wars is a tactical role-playing game series from Sega that takes place in a fictional version of the 1920s, and it's very like steampunky with mechs and stuff like that. And basically, all the cities around the world have these mech defending groups to defend the cities from these demons. And I really like the Sakura Wars games. They go all the way back to the Sega Saturn. But we didn't get most of them in North America. In fact, most of them don't have English translations at all. We just have Sakura Wars on PS2 and the Wii. So Long My Love. And then we had the reboot of Sakura Wars back in 2020, which actually did really well, so both commercially and critically. So I'm actually expecting that they do a follow-up kind of in the same engine and coming out this year. 3 years later, I think makes a lot of sense for this franchise. So I'm going to say Sakura Wars gets a sequel. Maybe it's Sakura Wars 2 with the same characters, or maybe they do a different city, because the series usually does like different cities around the globe, and each city has like a different kind of mech troop in it. So maybe that's how they do that one.
That's a good prediction. Is there a specific team that makes the Sakura Wars games, or is it generally Sega?
It's just generally Sega.
There's not.
They usually have like they don't really have like a dedicated team that just works on that specifically, because like it was a totally different team that did the newest Sakura Wars game than the previous ones, and I don't remember them off the top of my head. I can fact check it during your next thing anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really
Sounds
like the
good.
last one, but I know, Garrett, I don't think you played any of the Sakura Wars games.
No.
Right? Yeah.
The only thing I know of Sakura Wars is what you've mentioned, and also I kind of looked at the PlayStation Store and found the newest Sakura Wars, and it looks dope. It's always on sale. Is it a PlayStation exclusive?
It is a
Like,
PlayStation
or is it
exclusive.
on? That's the one thing that hung me up too. It's like it was only on PlayStation Store, so I think that's kind of interesting. That would be cool to have another Soccer Wars in there, and I would like to. I don't think I've ever seen gameplay of the Soccer Wars game, so
Yeah.
probably when the new one comes out, I
Yeah.
would like to see some gameplay for
And
sure.
with the newest one, they made it an action RPG as opposed to a strategy RPG. But it was still really
Okay.
fun. It was still a really good game. It's also a dating sim on top of that, so it's one of those things where I know that's not for everyone. I also looked up the
Mhm.
developer. It's actually Sega CS2 R&D, which is just basically blanket
Hmm.
statement for it's Sega. They work on pretty much everything at Sega. So there's not really
Got it.
there's not really like someone like a team specific that I would really reference or anything like that.
Okay.
But
Sounds good.
yeah, so there we
Cool.
go. Sakura Wars is getting a sequel. What about you, Garrett? What's your next prediction?
My next prediction, I'm going back into the well here. Same as last year, I'll probably get a point off, but I want this to happen, and I'll be the boy who cry wolf on this one. Avowed. Avowed is gonna get, I think, a gameplay showcase at E3, and you're gonna see a date holiday of this year. So I'm
Ooh.
thinking October, November. It's gonna hit this year. I know people are thinking, oh, but Outer Worlds 2, it should come out before Avowed, but I really think Avowed's really along the way. It's more like I want it to happen. It's like a desire. It's like I want to
Yeah.
see more of that game. Um, yeah, so that's gonna be my prediction is that we're gonna see a full gameplay showcase at E3, and we're gonna have a date October to November of this year, and
Nice.
we're gonna have it out.
Well, believe it or
And
not,
it's not
Garrett,
good.
Avowed was actually one of my predictions as well, but it was part
Okay.
of a bigger Xbox prediction, so I'm gonna save my timing for it.
Yeah,
But I
you
actually
say that.
think we're on a similar page when it comes to Avowed, where I think it's
Mhm.
of the big first party Microsoft games that we're waiting for, besides the three that of course we announced this year for Redfall, Starfield, and Forza
Mhm.
Motorsport. I actually think that we're gonna see Avowed sooner rather than later, sooner than a lot of the other Xbox projects,
Yeah.
I think. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think we're both on the same page. I think that maybe this year is the year where they give us a big blowout for it, especially since I would imagine Starfield is out by E3 this year. So if
Hope.
that's the case, that means they don't need to do another Starfield, showcase, gameplay showcase
Mhm.
during the E3 showcase this year. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
they might be onto
Yeah.
something. I
That,
hope so.
yeah, because you think of the other games that are coming for Xbox. I know we're gonna talk more about this later. Is like Obsidian always is putting out products left and right. Outer Worlds 2, I know they announced it. I know they're working kind of in line or in junction with Avowed, but I think Avowed is like their major project that they're working on. They really want to get out the door. So I just hope that would be great if it comes out this year. I'm interested to hear what Obsidian does with high fantasy,
Yeah.
with a Skyrim, with a Witcher, because I do enjoy the Outer Worlds one, but I really enjoyed Fallout New Vegas. So I know they're more of a narrative-driven role-playing game, and I think that would pair really well with a high fantasy game. So Avowed is definitely in the top of my list for
Yeah.
RPGs.
That's definitely like one of the RPGs that we don't have a release date for that I'm probably the most excited for. So I also,
Hmm.
just like you, Garrett, I can't wait for that game, especially after, Pentiment or like the last couple Obsidian releases. Like they've just been
Yeah.
so good, for a long time now, and I just can't wait to see Avowed. It's gonna be so good. So
Hmm.
yeah.
It's gonna be great.
All right.
All right, Ryan.
Next up, the most Ryan Turford prediction in the world is coming up.
Oh no.
And I have this written in my prediction, written this way. In an effort to bring back all their older franchises, as we saw in 2021, Square Enix will announce and release a new Parasite Eve game coming in 2023. They will also add the original Parasite Eve games to PSN as individual purchases as backwards compatible games, similar to what they did with Valkyrie Profile Lilith when Valkyrie Elysium came out. And I think it'll be a very different style game, probably a third-person action adventure game, and maybe not even an RPG. But at the same time, I really think that Parasite Eve is coming back. It's about time. Square Enix has shown us, like in 2022, Garrett, that they wanted to take all their old IPs, just bring them all back, and just release them all at the same time. And kind of who cares about release timing? People will buy them anyways, because like Star Ocean fans will buy anything that they put out. It turns out that game's really good though, so I mean there's a reason why we bought that game. I think that it's finally time, Garrett. I think it's finally time they go back to the well of Parasite Eve, and they finally deliver us a new Parasite Eve game that I've been waiting for ever since the third birthday came out on the PSP so many years ago, and I can't wait. But tell me I'm crazy, Garrett. Please tell me I'm crazy.
I hope this is, true for you, Ryan. I just want this to become existence for you. I don't know that it's realistic, because I think there was some kind of announcement last year that ended up being a trademark for an NFT game.
Yep.
And we know Square Enix has been talking about NFTs. I don't know where their stance is now, because that kind of subject's always been shifting.
I'm glad you said that, Garrett, because they released a New Year's message this year, and the entire New Year's message all about NFTs. So
great,
about how their first NFT games are coming out in 2023, and there are many more NFT games to be excited for, to be announced later this year. So there you go.
Great, fantastic. This is turning out to be well worth investment. So anyways, Parasite Eve, whatever it comes to, I doubt it's gonna be like a turn-based role-playing game too. I think if anything, it would be like a horror game with some RPG elements, like an action-ish.
That's kind of what I'm imagining too. Yeah. And I mean, not only that, but I feel like also, and we're going to maybe get into this a little bit with some of our predictions, or at least we have a question about this as well. With so much Final Fantasy this year, I feel like Square Enix is going to release something that we don't know about that's not Final Fantasy related. Like they're going to have like a big game for the fall that's not Final Fantasy. We know they have Forspoken this month in January, but I feel like they're going to have, I just have a feel in my gut that they're going to have more than just that for this year, more than just Final Fantasy stuff. Because you never know, Final Fantasy doesn't appeal to everyone, but other Square Enix titles do. So I feel like Parasite Eve is definitely different enough to fill that void, and that's why I'm hanging my hat on that. But honestly, it could be a bunch of different things. They could bring back something like Vagrant Story, or some other weird Square Enix franchise, or maybe they could do like another Mana game or something like that. They could go all kinds of do all kinds of crazy stuff. But anyways, that's enough about that. Garrett, what is your third prediction, my friend?
Prediction number 3. And I want this to happen more than anything for Sean Capri over here. This is for you, Sean. Prediction for Dragon Age. We've been hearing rumblings about this new Dragon Age game coming from BioWare. We know the stands with BioWare, man. Like, it's been a hit or miss, and more of a miss for the past 10 years. With those studios, I want this game to kind of rock the boat. I want Dragon Age, now it's called Dreadwolf, so we can say that, and it's kind of like a connection to Inquisition or whatever.
Yep.
It's gonna be a full-blown gameplay showcase around E3 time, because I know EA doesn't really involve with E3. They may have a presentation or something. They'll push Dragon Age Dreadwolf, kind of initial reveal, have a full demo, full gameplay showcase, and people are gonna be surprised at what they see. It's gonna kind of revitalize that old not classic BioWare, but kind of a modernized version of, like, let's say Dragon Age Inquisition, kind of newer tactics, newer models, gonna look smoother. And I think it's gonna be dated for like it's just gonna say 2024. Okay. I don't think they're gonna have a specific time window with it. I think they're still gonna try PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series, so previous gen and this gen. But I can believe that they just drop off or delay the last gen versions of the console.
Yeah.
So I think I think that's my prediction is that Dragon Age Dreadwolf is going to showcase at E3 time and it's going to surprise people, most people.
I
So
imagine that
there you
one,
go.
because like EA is not really like an E3 group. Maybe that's a summer Game Fest announcement,
Yeah.
which of course we know is happening around that same time as well. I think that's usually where
Hmm.
EA does a lot of their announcements now. But you're right. Like actually, they tease the idea of getting more Dragon Age information this year. And I imagine you're probably right. It is probably ready for next year. So I hope that's
Hmm.
comes out and it's awesome because not just Sean Capri, Garrett. I also really love Dragon Age, so I
Oh,
can't wait
okay.
for
Cool.
that game. Whenever it comes out,
Sweet.
I'm actually really excited for it. Especially after like the ending of Inquisition, which then leads into the rise of the
Mm.
Dreadwolf, which is what this one's all about. So I'm actually
Cool.
pretty excited about this one, and I can't wait to find out more. And yeah, I just hope, to your point, Garrett, I hope that this is just the win that BioWare needs to kind of bring back,
Pretty
old
much.
school BioWare kind of feels with the game. And
Hmm.
I can't
Hmm.
wait to see what they have with this one. But yeah, hopefully we hear
So,
about it sometime this summer. That's one I really, as much as I don't know if I want to give you points, Garrett. I and that's one that I'm actually really hoping it comes true because I really want to see that
mhm,
game and be excited for it. But there
mhm.
we go.
Sounds good.
All right, next up, I'm getting this one out of the way now. I had it further down the list, but you talked about it in your second prediction, so I may as well just bring it up now.
Go
Microsoft
for it.
will announced during their E3 showcase this year that both Fable and Avowed are coming in the
Mm.
first half of 2024. Kind of like the
Got it.
so they're gonna do it. I feel like they're gonna do a E3 showcase this year, like they did last year, where they'd be like, here are the 35 games that are out in the next 12 months, leading into the early part of 2024. And I feel like Fable and Avowed are actually both going to be in there. Yes, I know that earlier today there was that rumor that Fable has been totally restarted internally, but then that was later proven to be incorrect. So I
Mhm.
don't think that game is actually in trouble. I actually think both Fable and Avowed both come out next year, early next year. Maybe one
Cool.
comes out in January, maybe one comes out in the summertime. But I think we're actually going to get both of those games next year. Yes, it's a little weird for Microsoft to kind of overlap their RPGs like that. But I'm going to maybe save this for the Xbox Drive later this week. I think Xbox has a bigger holiday game this year that's not an
Mhm.
RPG, that they're going
Mm.
to announce a release date for, maybe around E3 time. So that'll be their
Okay.
big fall game, with then Fable and then Avowed being like early next year kind of thing. And maybe one of those games gets kicked to the later part of 2024, but that's not here for time for me to predict that. It's the beginning of 2023, and future Ryan in 2024 will of course predict, one of those games getting kicked down the can if it comes to that. But that's my
Mhm.
prediction. Microsoft will announce both Fable and Avowed are coming in the first half of 2024. And for future Ryan's consideration, when of course I listen back to this episode in a year, Garrett, if both of those don't get announced, I get 0 points. I'm not giving myself half seals on that one.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
what do you think about
Um.
that timing, Garrett? Because I know we're kind of
That
on the same page, but we're just a little bit different.
that's interesting. I believe more about coming out next year than this year. I just really want it to be the big game
Mhm.
for Xbox. Yeah, I'm hesitant. I don't know what Fable is. Like I'm not really into the series. Like it seems more comical, I guess, and more cartoonish. I'm wondering though what's the tone of this
It's
new Fable
very
game because
much British humor, and that's what I think they're going for this
yeah.
time around.
Hmm. I'm curious what this game is gonna be because if it's I don't think it's gonna be really similar to Avowed, but you should probably space them out. So if they are in the first half of 2024, at least be like a month or two apart. Um, yeah, I that would be cool if both games just come out and Microsoft kind of needs this kind of games releasing
Yeah.
sooner rather than later because we've been waiting for a little while for these and we've been hearing about these games for more than a few years now. The studios have been acquired for a while now, so we want to see some of these Microsoft projects kind of come out, and those two would be great heavy hitters in the RPG category, especially, um, you know, yeah, I think that would be great to
Yeah.
see.
Because again, because like especially you have to also consider the Game Pass model as a consideration as to when they would release these games, because it's one of
Hmm.
those things where even though they're both RPGs, they could release within a month of each other, and that would be okay because Microsoft wants you to subscribe to Game Pass and is not worried about sales anyways. And it'll
Hmm.
keep your RPG subscription longer, I guess. But the way I imagine it in my mind is one comes out in February and one comes out in June, kind of thing, or May, which I
Yeah,
still think is like really good spacing. Like that's like if
that's
it's
good
February
spacing.
and
Yeah.
May, that's 3 months right there. Like I think that's more
Hmm.
than enough time between the two of them, and plus, I think Avowed is going to play very differently than something like Fable, because Fable is more like it's a 3D, like it's a third person action RPG, but
Mm.
it has more arcadey combat than what I'm expecting from something like Avowed, which Avowed seems like it's
Okay.
more traditional Elder Scrolls style combat. So they're going to be
Hmm.
very different feeling games, both from their tone and from their gameplay, that I feel like they'll probably be very well separated from each other, even only launching maybe 3 months apart from each other. Just like how it
Yeah.
sounds like we're going to get the three big Microsoft games that we know about already, in the first half of this year. Where it sounds like we're getting Redfall and Starfield and Forza in the next 6 months at this point. So it
Yeah.
sounds like they don't mind keeping some of their games closer together. But
Cool.
yeah.
That sounds good.
All right, Garrett, hit me with number 4.
Yes. Number four. Let's keep on with the Bethesda train, or the Microsoft Xbox train. Bethesda's in there now, apparently. I think let's talk about Fallout, because I want something to happen with Fallout and not Fallout 5 coming out in 2030,
Yep.
or 2032 or whatever, the next big one. They need they need to have something with Fallout. And ignore Fallout 76. That's fine for the very specific fans that like that type of gameplay style. We need something else with the Fallout lore, the Fallout games. We've been talking about it, I think, extensively, for the past year. Um, and I think this is what's gonna happen. They're gonna reveal at the Xbox showcase. I think it's gonna be that one game that's not gonna be within 12 months or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that they normally do. A Fallout 1
Ooh.
remake. It's just gonna be a title. It's gonna be Fallout remake or whatever, and they're gonna say, "Hey, we're collecting a bunch of people from the teams of Obsidian, Bethesda, and Exile, coming together, the key folks from those studios that made the original Fallout 1, come in here, try to modernize it." I think it's still, I think it's gonna be a first person big side game. Like
Mm-hmm.
like it's gonna be a Bethesda style game, um, but have that Fallout 1 lore and story. So I think that would be great to see. This is a dream, you know, um, kind of prediction, but I want this to happen. What
Yeah.
do you think
I mean,
about
it
this
sounds
one?
like my Parasite Eve prediction, Garrett. Where I mean, it sounds like a dream, but also it sounds too good to not be a thing that exists in real life at some point. So yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, they got to go back to the Fallout well at some point. And you're right, like they can't just have the Fallout IP just sit there and do nothing until
Yeah.
Fallout 5 comes out again, like in 2032 at this point or later. Like I
Hmm.
still think Elder Scrolls 6 might not even come out until like
Next generation.
2028 or
Like,
2029, right? So
yeah.
like I feel like that might be a like they can't let Fallout sit for that long with just Fallout 76. They got to do something with it. So
Hmm.
you're right. Like either they do a Fallout remake in the style you're talking about, or they just have an Exile do like a console port
That would be great.
and
Hmm.
remake of the original Fallout. That would be a great idea too. But they got to do something with it, absolutely. So I like your idea a lot, Garrett. That's a game I would love to play. I like a Fallout remake. I think
Yes.
that'd be really awesome.
I think there's a lot of lore and value in these classic games, and they're just kind of locked away behind these, that PC old, isometric computer style games that a lot of people. It's hard. Fallout 1 is a hard game to go back to.
Yeah.
So I think it would be great to see like these older games kind of be refreshed and have some new folks go in here and try some stuff out. Yeah, I just want a little bit more Fallout content. Just saying Fallout 5, it's happening. We're making it after Elder Scrolls. I'm like, oh goodness.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Nice.
yeah, there you go.
Sweet. All right, Garrett, here's prediction number 4. Speaking of old franchises, segue, Square Enix announces an HD 2D remake of Terranigma is in development, published by Nintendo, similarly to, Triangle Strategy and stuff like that. It's Switch exclusive, and it comes to PC as well. Launches early 2024. So Terranigma is the last of kind of the Super Nintendo 3 games that never reached North American shores, that are now controlled by Square Enix. Of course, Terranigma is actually an Enix game and not a Square game, but it's kind of in the group of Live Alive and Trials of Mana, where it never really received an English translation, and it's just prime for some kind of remake or reboot in North America, because it's a really good game with fantastic music and visuals. And I think this has been one that's been rumored for a while, and I think it's happening. I think this is the year where we get the announcement that Terranigma is coming, but it won't come out this year. It'll be early next year. I'd say, in fact, to define this for future Ryan, Q1 of 2023. So like February of next year, I think.
2024.
Or 2024. You're right. So early 2024, Terranigma, it's going to be a thing, and I'm excited. I hope that this is real. I told you, I'm going out there with some of these predictions, because Terranigma, most of y'all probably didn't expect to turn on this episode of the RPG Cave and have me talk about Terranigma for the Super Famicom of all games. But this is one of the 3 that we've been wanting in North America for a long time, that people have made repro carts of, with a fan translation on it for the longest time, and now it's finally time for Terranigma, I think, to come out. But what do you think, Garrett?
Cool. I've never heard of this game. You probably have mentioned it previously, so great. That would be awesome. It sounds like your timeline's interesting. How it's like gonna be early next year. I forgot how Live Alive was kind of rolled out. It was announced early last year, like earlier in the year, and then it was out in the summer.
Yeah.
Like it was all within a year. I can see Square Enix doing another thing like that. It's like, let's grab a classic game, let's work with Nintendo, publish it out in the summer, or out of the way with other bigger games. But I think that's what they like to do with these older classic games. So I can see that being a possibility of being announced and then playable or released in July or August, somewhere around there. So what do you think?
Yeah, like, because that's the thing. That's the type of timeline I'm anticipating for this release. But the reason I put it in early 2024 is this reminds me a lot of Octopath Traveler 2, where maybe it fits in like the February 2024 slot, where even like they announce it at like the last direct of the year, and then it just comes out in February like that. So you and I are both on the same page as far as how quickly from announcement to release this comes out, but it's just a matter of that's why I just think it'll get announced at the end of this year, kind of thing. But also, what's interesting about this is that, and kind of, is one of those things that kind of bets against me with this prediction, Garrett, is the fact that this would be the very first action RPG in this engine, because we've only gotten strategy, like turn-based games, so strategy role-playing games with Triangle Strategy, or, turn-based RPGs like Octopath Traveler or Live Alive, but we haven't really gotten an action RPG in this engine before. So I feel like this would be an interesting step for it, but I think it's one that the engine can handle. But also, too, if you're going to remake a Super Nintendo game, everyone said it a million times, and I'll just say it again, like, the HD 2D style is definitely, like, the way to go with it, because 9 times out of 10, you don't end up with the result that you end up with, with something like Trials of Mana, where it was, like, where it kind of outshone a lot of his other, 3D remake counterparts, where it was the diamond in the rough when it came to a lot of that stuff. Because most of the times when you get like a 3D remake of a 2D Super Nintendo game, it doesn't always work out super well. Like, it usually either feels too weird or too different from the original game, or just you lose a lot moving away from the pixel art, which is why I think, like, if they're going to remake any of their old games, even action RPGs, I think they're going to definitely leverage this engine to do it. So if Terranigma is coming back at all, I think it'll be in this style, in HD2D.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. But all right, Garrett, final prediction. Hit me with it.
Final prediction. This one, I think I make it oddly specific just to make everyone like this. This would be hilarious if this happened this year, but could be possible. Starfield. All right, I'm going crazy with this one, Ryan. Starfield. We'll get it. We'll have a release date. There'll be an Xbox event or whatever. They'll have a release date. It'll still be the first half of 2023. So I still believe it. It's gonna be though on May 12th, 2023, and that is the same day as Tears of the Kingdom was announced as well. I think it will be released on the same day, and it's just going to be a major discussion of who's going to be playing what during that time. Of course, all the Nintendo fans, they're going to flock over to Tears of the Kingdom. All the, Xbox or PC focused players that are into RPGs will go to Starfield. And I think what's going to happen with the reviews is that, it's a great game, but performance wise on Starfield it's 30 frames per second. And they're going to knock on it so hard because it's going to be 30 frames per second. We saw it on gameplay last time around, and we've heard from Todd Howard from an extensive interview. They don't care about frames as much compared to the game itself and being performance wise and like, can you go through a quest or whatever. So I think it'll still be a really good review score, but I'm thinking it's going to be hampered. That's one of the negative things is the frame rate.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be pretty much it. So
that makes me sad because I picked it in Fantasy Critic against the trophy room, Garrett, and we need that game to hit. Okay, we need that to be okay. To be fair,
too.
we actually picked it pretty low in Fantasy Critic this year because, believe it or not, there's lots of big games to pick in Fantasy Critic this year. But yeah, I think you're on base with a lot of that stuff. The release date is actually interesting because it almost doesn't matter since it is in Game Pass. At that point, like I know that Yarden in chat points out that release date would be Starfield Suicide. But I don't know if it actually would be because it is on Game Pass.
No.
So people get it with your subscription. It almost doesn't matter if you play it day one anyways, because people aren't going to probably be running out to buy it, except for the people who play on Steam, I guess, are probably going to be the people buying Starfield. So it almost doesn't matter if they release it next to Zelda. But that's interesting. That's interesting they would do that.
I just find it would be an odd coincidence, It'd be like, oh, you decided to put it on the same day as Tears of the Kingdom. We'll see how this one goes.
You'd still run into the same discussion even if they released it even 2 weeks apart from Zelda, I think. Because I think you're going to hear that about a lot of any game that decides to release within 2 weeks both before or after Tears of the Kingdom, I think. Like that whole month block around Tears of the Kingdom, if anything comes out in that block, I think you're gonna have people ask that question about it, kind of because you're right. Like no company wants their game probably to release and have the Horizon Zero Dawn problem of releasing like the week before Breath of the Wild again. Like I don't think anyone wants to do that with their major games this year. So I think people are going to steer clear of that date. But you never know. Microsoft is the company that's crazy enough to do it, where they might just be like, nope, it's on Game Pass anyway, so it almost doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. People will still buy it or subscribe to Game Pass to play Starfield because not everyone has a Nintendo Switch. So
that's true. And I think Starfield, they want it as clean as possible, like minimal amount of bugs and checking, because they know that one mess up and it's not going to be good for Bethesda. Like they cannot break this game at all. So I'm sure they're cleaning the bugs as much as they can. They said first half of 2023. They don't want to do a new E3 whatever all over this. So I think they're going to keep that first half time window, but it's going to be later. So it's pretty believable that it'll be around May time, maybe early June era. So I'm very excited for Starfield, by the way. That's like my number one game. So doesn't matter about the frame rates for me.
Yeah. No, same. I mean, Skyrim was totally fine playing that at 30 frames per second. So I don't mind it either. Because Yeah, as much as people, said bad things about Gotham Knights running at 30 frames per second, like I honestly still found it was totally playable even at that frame rate. And I think we're going to see a lot more games from now on be 30 frames per second, and I think we're just going to have to be okay with it with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad you brought up Starfield. I only facepalmed a bit when you started talking about Starfield again, because I thought you were just going to do the same prediction as last year. So he was going to be a 90 on Metacritic again and just calling it a day. But I'm glad you
no.
a little bit broader with that. But anyways, Garrett, I'm ready to give you my craziest prediction, my final prediction. This is one that I want to happen so badly that I'm trying to will it into existence with this prediction. But I also don't think it's totally unbelievable either, given the way we've seen the two companies I'm about to talk about handle things. So, Garrett, as you know, they have a new Shining Force game coming out on mobile very, very, very soon. It is like a strategy role-playing as well, like the old Shining Force games. And I think what that's building towards, because we've seen Sega do this before with their mobile entries, is they'll usually have a mobile entry release, and then that will kind of tee up a console game of theirs to come out. So I believe Sega will partner with Nintendo to announce during a Nintendo Direct that a new mainline style Shining Force game is in development. It's a strategy RPG like the old Shining Force games are. And best of all, Garrett, Camelot is the developer. They will be developing the game and Nintendo will publish it. Kind of like what happens with Bayonetta. Early 2024 is what I say for the release date. Again, for Future Ryan, I will quantify it by saying it will release in February of 2024. I think that's a thing. Okay. Because they have, and that way it kind of gives the Nintendo kind of like a dual pillar strategy when it comes to strategy RPGs, where they can have a Fire Emblem and a Shining Force that they publish, kind of release in odd years, so they don't have to have a Fire Emblem game from Intelligent Systems every single year. They can then have Camelot or another team work on Shining Force, and then kind of have them go back and forth like that, where they could almost Call of Duty it, where they have like a new strategy RPG every single year. So that is where my mindset is this one. And also, I just want a new mainline Shining Force game so bad that I'm willing to make up a crazy prediction and wager my points on the line here for the entertainment value of trying to will that into existence. But I don't know. The way that Nintendo and Sega work together on stuff, I actually think something like this is totally believable. But what do you think about this, Garrett? How crazy am I with this prediction?
Okay, there's a lot of things to unpack here. Okay, a new mainline Shining Force game. Okay, now you have some, leverage with the mobile release or whatever. It's a possibility. I can see that. Working with Nintendo, okay, I can see a partnership with Sega and Nintendo with this strategy role-playing game that can kind of, be an extra thing, fill the gap. Nintendo published, whatever. Working with Camelot. This one, I'm less like, okay, this is getting to dream fantasy land, because we all know, of course, we know Camelot originally worked on these games, but now they're not working on these types of games, and they're doing something completely different. I think, knowing Nintendo, they have some open relationships with certain studios, and some of them they are not. And I think Camelot's in the not category. I don't think that one's up for sale to work on other projects other than their don't they do the sports games now?
They only do the sports games now.
Yeah, I think they're gonna.
They run like support studio on a lot of RPGs for Nintendo, which is why my mindset was like, okay, there are still people there that are passionate about RPGs or want to work on RPGs. So that's why I actually thought that this move actually would make sense, where it almost would be like a return to their roots almost. Which is why I put two and two together. Like, this is actually crazy enough that it might actually work. So not only that too, but Sega doesn't really have like a good strategy role-playing studio, which again makes sense as to why Sega would want to reach out to Nintendo to then have maybe one of Nintendo's developers work on it. So that was just my mindset when coming up with this prediction. But
it's a great one. I would love for this to happen, because I did play a good chunk of the first Shining Force, and it was super fun. So need to go back to it, of
Yeah,
course.
at some point.
But
It's on the list.
at some point, in
Yeah.
the abyss.
Oh my god. But yeah, the Shining Force games are so good. Like, I just even if it's not true and it's not Camelot and it's someone else, just please anyone Sega, please have anyone work on Shining Force and make it an actual Shining Force game and not some, Tales of game ripoff or some weird,
Yeah.
game that uses the GameCube microphone or something like that. Because yes, those were all things that existed. So we don't need anything like that. Just go back to classic Shining Force. And again, Sega does this with their mobile games where they'll tee up, new releases by releasing a mobile version. So that's why I think it's actually in the cards that we might actually see a return to Shining Force, even if it's not Camelot, even if it's not as described. We might actually see that by 2024, I think. But
That'd be great.
yeah, there you go. Before we go to the listener predictions, Garrett, did you have any honorable mentions at all that you wanted to quickly run through?
I do have another prediction, but it's within the questions, so
Okay.
I will wait
Sure.
till I answer. But I don't think I have any other honorable mentions in my list. Actually, I'm just kind of surprised when I was going through this and making predictions. I was very surprised. I didn't have much PlayStation focus centric role playing games in my predictions list, and it's not just maybe it's because I'm not really into that ecosystem, but at the same time there's not like a role playing game there. I'm like, oh, I need to predict that. And I think the same thing was surprising to me was Nintendo. Last year I had a lot more Nintendo related predictions. This year, at least in the beginning of the year, not so much. I know I'm getting Fire Emblem this month, but later on it's just kind of, we just don't know
Yeah.
what kind of role playing game scene is going to be like. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Because really, like, we know I think we know almost the entire spring and summer lineup. At this point, it's really just what's coming out this fall, I think, is really the mystery, or 2024, which is why, like, it was so interesting doing predictions this time, because we could that's why we went a little bit wild and crazy with some of this stuff, because we just don't know. So it could literally be any number of things. But my other two honorable mentions, if I may, Garrett. My first one is Bandai Namco reveals the newest game in the Tales of series. It will not be a sequel to Tales of Arise. It's going to be brand new Tales of game, launching sometime in 2024. It'll take place in the same engine. So that's why I think there will be like a pretty quick turnaround on this one, because I think they've probably been working on that one since before Tales of Arise actually wrapped. Like, it was probably in pre-production, and using the same engine and stuff like that. I think they can. 3 years is more than enough time for the next one. So I think we'll get that one in 2024. But also, as part of that prediction, I had Tales of Destiny 1 and 2 come to PlayStation Plus Premium. They're both PS1 games. They're like ridiculously expensive. They're like $300 to $400 for complete copies. So I think I think them coming to PS Plus Premium would be awesome. And then my second prediction was Gung Ho Games announces a double pack similar to the Grandia 1 and 2 remaster that came to Switch a couple years ago, that a double pack of Lunar 1 and 2 is coming to Switch and PC sometime in 2023, because they've been sitting on those rights for a long time now, and I think it's time to finally bring Lunar back. So I think now is the time to do that. Even if it's just a re-release of the first one, I would love to see that. But anyways, let's let some of our listeners into the cave with us. Let's start with Blaze Knight, who has his first prediction. RPG of the year will be playable on Xbox, Blaze Knight says for his prediction. That's an interesting one, because that is a possibility. Even though we know, Final Fantasy 16 is coming to PlayStation only, it'd be interesting to see if the best RPG of the year was also on Xbox. But
yeah, I can only think of Starfield as a potential candidate. Avowed, if that releases this year, that's another big contender. But I'm trying to think of third party folks that is the RPG of the year. There's some interesting newer franchise RPGs that will be on Game Pass, like Wolong, as well as Lies of P. I'm interested to see what those games are, and I will try them out because they're on Game Pass. But yeah, I can't think of other third party big RPGs playable on Xbox this year.
Yeah, but oddly enough, the best RPG of the year, Garrett, for 2022 was playable on Xbox, because it was Elden Ring.
That's true. Elden Ring.
Yeah. So you never know. I don't think it's that crazy.
Might be a third party. Yeah.
Yeah. But next up, Savoy Prime says Trails in the Sky trilogy gets announced for PS4 and PS5, or at least I hope so. That would be pretty awesome. I don't know if they would announce that this year because we know, Trails of Revelry is coming out this summer. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't know what NIS does. They're always an interesting company to follow. So I hope that we get that at some point. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It might be too soon for them to announce that, but we'll see.
They do announce it, and they do a lot of ports.
Yeah.
So, and Trails in the Sky is all of it's on Steam. So I can see that being inevitable. The Trails in the Sky trilogy coming to PS4 and PS5. It would be great.
Next up, Yarden says Sea of Stars releases this summer and receives universal honor and praise. Look, I can't read. Okay, Garrett, it's late. It is instantly placed on a pedestal, sitting alongside with some of the greatest RPGs of all time, including Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. Will Sea of Stars, Garrett, be that good? Will it be comparable to Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VI in the pantheon of the greatest RPGs of all time?
That's hard to say with these newer indie kind of classical based role-playing games. Like, they're gonna be great, but they're gonna be largely inspired by these greatest RPGs of all time. So there's always gonna be that comparison. So standing side by side, maybe for some people, yes, I can see that, and I can see it being extremely solid. I love what I'm saying of Sea of Stars. It all just depends on what this game really is, what the story's like, we know what the turn-based mechanics kind of looks like too. It looks gorgeous, by the way, so it's definitely on the top of my list.
Yeah.
It's very hard though to say it's side by side with Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, whatever that is.
Yeah. I think that's just too high of a bar to set for a game like this.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's going to be awesome, but I don't know if it's going to be that good. Similarly to how a lot of people thought maybe The Messenger might be, just as good as Ninja Gaiden or even better. And I don't know if it actually accomplishes that goal, because they're just two very different games. Just like Sea of Stars, kind of like The Messenger did, because there's actually a big gameplay twist that happens in The Messenger that I won't spoil for anyone who hasn't played it yet. That completely changes the way that game plays. And that was a big turnoff for some people. And I wonder if they do something similar with this game. So I'm curious about that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see reviews for Sea of Stars when it comes out. But I'm excited for it. And we'll talk about it more, I think, next week during the RPG preview episode. But then last prediction comes to us from Skycatcher Gaming, who says, my wish/prediction is that PlayStation puts a ton of PS1 and PS2 JRPGs on their PS Plus subscription plan. Absolutely, Skycatcher Gaming. This is something I've been wanting for a while, because they keep putting one game a month on there, and half the time it's Ridge Racer or not an RPG, and I'm just like, please, Sony, please put something worthwhile on PS Plus Premium for us RPG fans. I mean, Legend of Dragoon is sitting right there. You own it, Sony.
It's right
you
there.
can just put it on there. I don't see why they don't just do that and then go from there. But yeah.
Yeah, man, this was an interesting one to see this roll out. I was smart to not upgrade. At the same time, I don't play too much PlayStation, so kind of understandable that I didn't upgrade my plan, but it's a huge miss not seeing a lot of games from the PS1 and PS2 era on at least the PlayStation Premium and kind of tier as well. Is it only on the top tier?
It's only on the top tier
games. Right. They need to get more out this year. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, especially because that's the big advantage of having the top tier, is having access to those games. And the fact that they're not even putting, they're adding a lot of PS3 games, which is fine, but the PS3 games are streaming only, which is the way that no one wants to play those games. So it's just like, it almost is like kind of like a double whammy, or just, it's a major feel bad. And again, a lot of the games are sitting right there. The Square Enix games, I think Square Enix has made it perfectly clear that they're not putting their games on subscription services for, when it comes to classic titles. Like, that's why we haven't seen, Square Enix RPGs on, Super Nintendo or NES Online. Just like when Valkyrie Profile Lilith, the PSP port, which was, again, not a port of the game. It's literally just the backwards compatible PSP game. That never came to the service either. You have to buy that digitally, or as part of the collector's edition for Valkyrie Elysium. So I don't think Square Enix is in the market of putting those there. And I know that's a lot of the RPGs on those consoles is from Square Enix specifically. But anyways, moving on, Garrett, we have questions this week as well that are not predictions. So we're going to end this one. In fact, there's a question directly directed to you, Garrett. So this comes to us from Nagashaka, who says, this question is specifically for Garrett, since we know how Ryan feels about this topic. Do you think Final Fantasy 16, a new expansion for Final Fantasy 14, and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, which is the sequel to Final Fantasy 7 Remake, are all coming out this year? And then Yarden actually has a follow-up question as well. So Yarden says, follow-up to Nagashaka's question, if Final Fantasy 16, 14's expansion, and Rebirth plus the console re-release of the Pixel remasters all land this year, is that too much Final Fantasy in 1 year? Should they split it? Should they split it up a lot? So Garrett, obviously, I'm on, for those that don't know, we actually do a Patreon only show every month called The Console War Room with our friend over at the Trophy Room, Mr. Badbit and Kyle Stevenson. And this month's episode, which was actually free for everyone to listen to, even if you don't have our Patreon, we actually released it for everybody, and we did a fantasy draft for this year, Xbox Drive versus Trophy Room. And one of the things we talked about on there was, will this actually come out? And I made my intentions known that I actually think that Rebirth, so 7 Remake 2, and 16 come out in the same year. Like, I'm very and the Final Fantasy 14 expansion. I think they all come out this year, believe it or not. But I have my reasoning for it. But Garrett, I'm going to start with you. Nagachaka asked you specifically, what do you think about this?
It is a lot of Final Fantasy. I'll give you that. I think what I've seen from Final Fantasy 16, they're done. They're done with the game. Yeah. Like, they've been done with this game for a long, like not a long time, but they've been done for quite some time. They're just kind of working out some bugs. So I think they're going to hit Final Fantasy 16. I don't think they're going to delay it either. I think it's going to be hitting, I think in June, right? Like early June.
Yeah, it's already got a release date. So I think it's like June 10th or something like that.
Yeah, that's going to hit. Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth is the biggest toss-up, I think. I think it'll get delayed once. Okay. I think it will be spring 2024. So not much of a delay. Really just because, not from a development standpoint, but I just think spreading it out a little bit more would be okay, and delaying a few months. So yeah, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we just don't know much at all about this game.
Well, they did give us an announcement trailer with gameplay shown, and they did date it for winter of this year. So it has
winter.
Yeah, it's not a, but they all, and again, about the wording, they also used the exact same wording for Crisis Core for winter 2022, and it released in December. So I have so unless it gets delayed beyond winter 2023, then that's the only reason I would see it coming out next year as opposed to this year. Yeah, because actually,
okay, sorry.
Just to throw this out there, this might affect your train of thought. I actually think that Final Fantasy XIV's next expansion, if any one of these three gets delayed, it'll be that, because Final Fantasy XIV always has an expansion every 2 years, like clockwork. But the reason that would actually that might get delayed by, let's say, 3 months is because Yoshi P and a lot of the team that work on Final Fantasy XIV are also the team that are working on Final Fantasy XVI. I think that's why I have so much faith that game is going to hit that release date, and why the quality is going to be so good, because that team does not miss ever. So I feel like the thing that might end up getting sacrificed is not 7 Rebirth. I actually am pretty sure that's going to be in fact, I was so confident we locked in and loaded that for this year. I'm 90% confident that actually comes out in December of this year, and is the holiday game from Square. And 14's expansion is maybe what gets delayed. But
and I'll mention and that's interesting about your reasoning for Final Fantasy 14. I think the reason why I don't think that expansion does it, I mean, there's not even a release date for that, right?
It's not even announced yet. We don't even know what it's called.
Yeah.
They did say that they're formally announcing it at Final Fantasy XIV Fan Fest, which is in a few months. So,
Okay.
they could
Sounds
in
good.
theory announce it and release it this December, like they did Endwalker
Mhm.
2 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. So they haven't set a release date for Final Fantasy 14 expansion, but I don't think 7 Rebirth and 14 expansion they there's no like kind of, I mean there's overlap of course, but Final Fantasy 14 is an MMO.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't matter what Final Fantasy 16 or 7 Rebirth does. I think they'll just do their own thing. They'll set a release date in a few months, and I think, as you said, every 2 years, I can believe every 2 years, November, December, 7 Rebirth is still my, like, that's a wild card for me. I know you're reasoning with Crisis Core, but that's Crisis Core, and
yeah,
this is a, completely sequel of 7 Remake. And, there's a lot of story differences, so we just don't know what's going to happen
yeah,
with this new one. So that's just what I think
yeah.
is that's the wild card.
Yeah.
So.
Also, to kind of play in this a little bit, it'll actually, if all those games release, and then also Fiat Rhythm Final Bar Line, which is also another Final Fantasy game, is coming out this year. So
Gosh,
that would
yeah.
be 5 Final Fantasy games, including a collection of 6 games, all releasing in the same year if all that comes out this year. But the
That's a
reason
lot of
why I think
Final
it might
Fantasy.
actually happen and why Square Enix might be crazy enough to do it is because it is like the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy. So I actually think that there's
True.
a possibility that because it's the anniversary, that's why they might do this. Like that's my reasoning
Yeah.
for it. But I don't know.
You're correct. That's too much Final Fantasy. Even like for me, this is like you're 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 matching trails of whatever. 7 sets of
Well,
trilogies
that's why they're
going
gonna
on over
break it
there.
up with Parasite Eve, Garrett. See, it all makes
Oh
sense.
my
It all
gosh.
makes sense. Oh my god. Oh, and Terranigma. I forgot about
See how it goes.
Terranigma. It's got to slide in there too.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Next up,
Nice.
we got Blaze Knight, who asked the question: which is your favorite storefront to shop for RPGs that you don't know about on Nintendo, PlayStation,
Mm,
Xbox, Steam, or other? So, before to give you some time to think, Garrett, I actually,
sure.
believe it or not, I actually think I prefer the PlayStation storefront for this because
Mm,
I feel
okay.
like of all the storefronts that are listed there, like that and Xbox, I think are probably the best for discovering new games. Because one,
Okay.
PlayStation, I think does a good job of not just highlighting on their store page PlayStation first party stuff, but they'll actually also highlight, lesser known games. Like Chained Echoes, for example, was actually highlighted on the PlayStation
Hmm.
Store a lot, despite the fact that none of us had really heard of that game.
Hmm.
And likewise on the Xbox Store, I think it's pretty easy to navigate. The reason why I don't say Switch or Steam is because you get so much shovelware on Steam or Switch that it's hard to navigate for games you don't know about. Because again, this question
Hmm.
specifically talks about RPGs that you don't know about on. So I
Hmm.
think the discoverability of new games really plays into this a lot, and I just think PlayStation, Xbox Store specifically are way better at discovering games I've never heard of on there. And I think PlayStation, I
Got
think, is
it.
probably the best one for that. But what do you think about this, Garrett?
Mhm. It is, yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think I don't discover games as much on storefronts.
Yeah,
It's more hearsay, more on Twitter, more on sales too. Like I see a sale, it's like, oh, what's this kind of indie RPG that's on sale? I've never heard of it. Let me check out what it is. So normally how I do, well, before I got a Steam Deck, normally how I did is on Nintendo Store, I would click on the sales and then click on RPGs, and they'll relatively like the top 50-ish role playing games has some good gems in there, and I would look up on YouTube and stuff like that. So I I would agree with you. Xbox and PlayStation probably highlights the RPGs. It's just I think the way I do it is just a lot different than going straight into the store. The PlayStation, I never go on the PlayStation store, really. The Xbox, really Game Pass opens me up to discover a lot of role playing games. And then now with my Steam Deck, it was more like I would rather get it on Steam and play that on handheld if it's like, those kind of lower demanding indie role playing games. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Like Chained
that's just
Echoes
how
is
I
like a
operate.
perfect example of that because like I know
Hmm.
you played it first before buying it on Steam, right?
I have it on Game Pass.
Oh, you have
So
it on
I've
Game
been
Pass.
playing it. Yeah, so I play on my Steam Deck, but I play it xCloud streaming.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. I figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, that's actually like a
As
good
you do a
idea.
Steam
Good
Deck.
idea. Like that's probably like a really good game to stream via XCloud to a device like Steam Deck.
Oh yeah,
Because it's
yeah,
turn-based.
it's really nice.
Yeah. But anyways, last question of the week comes to us from Delroy, who says, and this is more of a question I think for me, but feel free to chime in on this one, Garrett, as well. With the recent release
Sure.
of Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and the upcoming One Piece Odyssey in mind, which One Piece Odyssey, by the way, comes out next week, folks. Do anime RPGs interest you at all? And what other franchise would you like to see make the transition to RPGs? I'm not a big anime person, but I love the two Naruto Xbox 360 exclusive RPGs, which, by the way, Ubisoft made those, and they're also excellent, to Delroy's point. And he would love to see something modern done with Cowboy Bebop, which is interesting. And actually, that would be a new
cool.
Cowboy Bebop game, and for the first time since the PlayStation 2, because many people don't remember there was actually a Cowboy Bebop game on PlayStation 2, which is interesting.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really love anime, of course, as people know. So yes, I honestly would love to see more anime RPGs that are really well done. Because the problem with anime RPGs that we get now is they're just so hit and miss with quality. And to be fair, that's not just anime RPGs, that's anime games in general. We get so many, good ones, like so many bad ones, and it's hard to sometimes find the good ones. Like One Piece Odyssey, I'm actually like, even though I haven't really watched One Piece
good.
at all, that's a game I'm actually excited to play, but it is probably going to get lost in the shuffle for me personally with all the games coming out this month, unfortunately. But it is like the first big release of the year because it's coming out literally next week from the time of recording this. But I love anime, so I would love to see more anime RPGs. Like actually, I would have loved to see Ubisoft continue to do Naruto RPGs with, with the Naruto Shippuden series coming out. Like, I would love to see them do, something with that, and maybe do that whole series as like a series of RPGs in the same way. But I don't know. I guess the anime I would love to see an RPG for the most is maybe something like Code Geass, which is like a mecha anime. I actually think like that would make like a really cool RPG, and they could even you probably don't even have to follow Lelouch, who's the main character. You could maybe do something in the franchise where maybe you play as a different Geass user, and make it like a strategy role playing game, even, or a turn based role playing game. Like I think you could do a lot of interesting things with Code Geass as an IP. Or even something like Gurren Lagann would be like a cool RPG that you could see, or My Hero Academia. I think it would be like a really good, like, speaking of Marvel's Midnight Suns, which just came out, like having like a superhero RPG in an anime style would be really cool. So I think there's a lot of good ideas out there for anime RPGs. But I don't overly get excited for anime RPGs just because I know the bar has to be set for so low for them, because so many of them are hit or miss. Like God forbid if we finally get a good Sword Art Online game, I will be a happy person, because all those games are really terrible. So
they're not good.
And Garrett, what about you? I know, again, you're not really the big, anime person here, but what do you think about this question?
Yeah, I used to watch a lot more anime, but recently, not so much. And I completely, you're on the dot there, is that these anime role-playing games, more or less, they're more of a miss for me than hit. And I think it's just because there's so many other JRPGs that are well beloved and really good, like, the famous, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Tales of series. There's just so many other JRPGs that are so good that when these anime RPGs, is like the anime part of it doesn't carry the weight most of the time. But there is some gems in the rough there, as Delroy mentioned. I agree with you. One Piece Odyssey does look pretty good. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was a shining one out. Like, to me, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot would be like that. That would be cool. But I feel like I need to watch and be familiar more of the anime to play that game.
But that game is literally just playing the anime of Dragon Ball Z, so you learn kind of everything you need to know with that game, which is interesting, because it almost feels like you're just playing the TV show just outright. So I don't even think you need to watch the TV show and just play the game, because actually I know a fellow YouTuber, her name is Fem Trooper. She's also a fellow Canadian, and she'd never seen Dragon Ball Z before, but had played Kakarot And then she's like, "Oh my god, what have I been missing this whole time?" And then she went and watched Dragon Ball Z and loved it. So, because I remember her making a video about that, which was pretty funny. So shout out to Femtrooper on YouTube, because she does a whole bunch of RPG videos. Yeah, actually, and another diamond in the rough I would say is the Gust, of course, the studio that makes the Atelier games. Their take on Fairy Tail. Like, this is shown in anime. Like, their turn-based Fairy Tail game was awesome. I loved it to the point where it made me want to play the Atelier games, because I had never played a game from Dust before, and I just really, really enjoyed the Fairy Tail RPG. It was really like a really solid turn-based role-playing game. And if y'all haven't played it, it's on PlayStation 4 and it goes on sale all the time. I think it's really good if you like the Fairy Tail anime. Cool. But yeah, so I think there's a lot of good ideas out there. But yeah, it's just, they're always hit or miss. So it's hard to get excited about that.
Yeah, pretty much.
But
before we wrap up, Ryan, I do want to mention, I don't know why I didn't mention this in the beginning of the show. I've been playing Chained Echoes for a good while. I've been playing 10 hours of it, and this is kind of this sleeper hit role-playing game from an indie studio. Came out on Game Pass day one. It's super cool, man. I'm digging the story. It is that adventure style, like Dragon Quest and like Chrono Trigger type of game. Has its own lore, has its own story, has its own kind of turn-based combat, with its own unique set of mechanics over there too. Spices up the pacing of it. If you guys have Game Pass and you're into that type of stuff, Chain Echoes is a solid role-playing game. So far, so good. It's keeping me on my toes with the story. And me and my stories with RPGs, they got to be pretty good in order to keep my interest. So this one's keeping my interest throughout. So yeah.
It's on the list. And I have to decide, Garrett, what to play next. If I play that or Marvel's Midnight Suns, because those are two games I'm like so excited to play, but I don't know which one to play next. Because like, I do want to get one RPG in before the big stuff comes out in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm on the fence. Chain Echoes sounds awesome, and I really want to play it. But also Midnight Suns, I'm like, I kind of want to play that too. It's got cards and it's got Marvel characters. So who knows?
Yes,
we'll see.
And I heard it's a great game. So
I'll decide. Listen to the Xbox Drive on Wednesday. I'm sure I'll be talking. I'll probably mention when I decided to play. But enough about all that, Garrett. We got to get going. But before we go, Garrett plugs go.
You can follow me on Twitter @BlandExplosion. You can also find me on the Nintendo Shack, part of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network. We're live each and every Friday nights over at twitch.tv/PSVG, and releasing on all the podcast services, the Googles, the Apples, the Spotifys, and all that. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All the places that pods are caught. As for me, you can find me on Twitter @Ryan Turford. You can also find us on Twitter @Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 77th level of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.